So, as you said, my name is Rory Scott. I am a senior product manager at Visa, focusing on Visa Checkout, so on our digital side. So tonight I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about product management. But before we did that, I know the biggest question that most people ask is, well, how did you get into product management, right? So we'll start with that. That way, yes. All right. So I was born in Elk City, Oklahoma, and by the time I got to senior year, I realized that that's not where I wanted to stay forever. So I journeyed to Washington, D.C., went to Howard University, where I got a degree in business, focusing on information systems, right? So my degree is Bachelor of Business Administration and major was Management Information Systems. I knew at the time that I wanted to get into tech some way, but I didn't know the best way to do that or really what a tech job was, right? So I majored in information systems to kind of get an understanding of not only the technical side, but also the business side. So I learned C++ and Java and data structures, but I also learned marketing and accounting and finance, et cetera. So 2006, I graduated, went to Johnson & Johnson, where I got a job in IT, which I thought was the dream at the time. I felt like I was making $1 million. Got there, was in a rotational program. So I got a chance to see every single aspect of IT, at least within Johnson & Johnson, right? And did that for, the rotational program's 2 years, and then I stayed there for another 2 years as a project manager for SharePoint rollouts. So what we were doing was we would actually roll out a SharePoint site for every time we spun up a new drug or we're testing a new product or something like that. We had rigorous document management requirements, right? It's a healthcare company. So our team would roll out the SharePoint site so they can manage all of these documents and kind of keep track of everything. I absolutely loved it because what would happen is we'd set up the site and it'd be pretty much really just kind of point and click. But I would set up the site and set it up based on the requirements that every team needed and all of that. And I would set up a transition meeting with them, right? So I would walk through with the customer, this is what our product is, this is the site that you have, and do you have any questions? How do you intend to use this? And asking all of these questions. Absolutely loved it because it was so high touch. My boss hated it. My boss actually was like, just get the site out, just get done with it and move on to the next thing. And I realized at some point that that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be proud of the products that I was putting out. I wanted to get customer feedback. I wanted to make something that people were actually using, right? To be honest, I'm not sure I realized all of that at the time or was able to articulate all of that, but so I left my job. I moved out to California in search of a different career path. And at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I could actually come out here and merge kind of my two passions. So I had a passion of technology and a passion of politics, and said, well, Facebook just spent $1 million last year on lobbying, so I could go be a lobbyist for Facebook. That could work. No, didn't quite work out that way. But while I was here, I met the president of the Sacramento Observer, right? So Sacramento Observer is a 50, at the time 50, it's close to 60 years old, 60-year-old newspaper that was local to Sacramento, and believe it or not, in 2010 was, oops, go back. They were, screensaver. They were print only. And so the president comes to me and says, hey, I know you understand this digital stuff, right? I was like, yes, I know digital. So can you help me get this website off the ground? Can you get us a digital presence? I said, yeah, I think I could do that. Not really knowing what the heck I was doing, but I signed up for it anyway. So he had hired an engineering firm to come in and build this digital presence for him, build a website and social media and all that. But he didn't understand what they were talking about, and they didn't understand how to like convey the vision to him, right? So I came in and kind of played middleman. And so, long story short, eventually their relationship soured, and the engineering firm leaves. So it's just me as the only digital person in the entire company trying to execute the strategy for them and all of that. So I step up and say, well, why hire another engineering firm when I could just do this for you, right? So I learned, at the time it was WordPress. We launched it on WordPress. I learned how to do that. I taught myself PHP so I could customize it, and JavaScript so we could have nice little tricks and stuff on there. And did a lot of the redesigns of digital assets and things of that nature. And then we launched the site. And at the end of it, I was like, well, what do I do next? I still want a paycheck. So what's my next step here? So what I started doing is just digging, just searching through the internet, trying to understand, well, how do people manage websites? And how do you figure out what the next step is? What is your roadmap and all of that? And so I started with going to the president and say, well, what else do you want to see on the site? We launched exactly what you wanted. The news is there, but how do you want this site to work? And so he gave me a laundry list of things. It's like 15, 20 things. It was like, go build all this. I said, any priority? I said, no, just build it all at once. Thanks. So again, I keep researching, and what I stumbled across was the concept of like multivariate testing, right? Which essentially is what we did. I picked his top 3 features that he wanted and said, we're going to put an icon for all of these on your site. All right, so I whipped up a nice little icon for him in Photoshop and slapped it on the site. And what we did is we monitored the traffic to see how many people clicked on each of these icons and how many clicks were there per day, right? And whoever clicks on, or whichever icon gets the most clicks is what we'll build next, right? So we did that, and so I just kept learning. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I've never done anything like this before. So I started doing more research and realized that what I was essentially doing for him was product management, right? I didn't have a term for it at the time, and I found that term. I was like, oh, this is great. I want to dive deeper. I want to learn more. And so I transitioned from that job to, I started doing contract jobs here in Silicon Valley, right? So I started at Yahoo, and then I went to PayPal. PayPal was probably one of the more pivotal roles in my career. So where are we at? 2013. That's when I hit PayPal. When I got there, the company had, obviously everyone knows PayPal for enabling e-commerce, right? You go on a site, you pay with PayPal, and then you get your product, right? But what they were trying to do was actually deliver their own product, right? So they created the PayPal Here. Has anybody heard of that, PayPal Here? Dang. Okay. Well, marketing wasn't my job. So essentially, PayPal Here was their Square competitor, right? So it's the little credit card reader that you stick in your phone and scan, right? So they were trying to get all the small businesses in, but they just weren't doing it well enough, right? So they would have people sign up, they'd either get their dongle or decline it, and then that was it. But Square was just giving away dongles left and right. You could get one every 3 weeks, right? So we were like, well, we need a way to deliver that. We need an e-commerce site. So they brought me in to build the e-commerce site. So I got a chance to kind of learn everything from the ground up, and learning e-commerce and warehouse management and all of these things. And so, again, that was a contract role. So we launched that. We launched it in the US, we launched it in the UK and Australia. And by that time, my contract had expired and we couldn't renew the contract. So I transitioned from there to Macy's, where I just kind of doubled down on what I did. I said, you know what, I like this e-commerce stuff. I'll do that for a bigger retailer. So I went to Macy's, where I was a product manager for purchase and delivery. So purchase and delivery, we focused on everything from the moment you put your item in the bag on Macy's.com or Bloomingdale's.com to the moment it gets to your doorstep. And I specialized in, you could probably guess, payments. So I implemented PayPal as the first kind of digital payment source on the website, and then worked on quite a few other things there as well. So I spent about 3 years there, and 3.5 years, and then realized that I wanted to do something more. I wanted to get further into payments and understand not just the user experience, the design aspect of it, but also the back end. How do the APIs work, and how do we validate the credit cards, and all of these things, right? So I transitioned in December from Macy's.com to Visa, where I work on Visa Checkout, or Visa Checkout Open Platform. So the Open Platform at Visa is actually focused on, it's focused on enabling commerce on multiple devices, right? So it's, if a retailer wants to put Visa Checkout as one of their payment sources, they could do that. If Apple Pay or Google Pay wants to auto provision or auto populate credit cards that you've already used somewhere else, we can work with them and get that enabled on your device, so you don't have to go through and type in your credit card every time you purchase on your device. We work with Internet of Things, connected cars, at several different spaces. So it's a platform that enables all of these different forms of commerce. So that is my story. I only had one slide, so maybe I could wake up the screen again. But yeah, so that's how I got into product management. I started with project management and IT and realized that I wanted something where I could focus a little bit more on the customers, and I wanted to craft an actual great product. And so I've kind of been on a journey for that and finding my niche here in the Bay Area. So we have about an hour, so I wanted to start by kind of opening the floor up for questions to see what questions do you guys have about product management, about the field in general, getting into it, my career, or payments in general. Yes?
How does Visa differentiate from all the other companies that you work with in terms of product management?
Right. Visa's product management is interesting because every company that I've worked with at the time that I was there was a pretty big company, right? But even though Visa is a huge legacy company, right, the digital aspect of it is almost like a startup, right? People see us as pretty much a different organization. We are the rock stars of Visa, kind of. But I think the major difference is all of these large companies that I worked for, I was a product manager in a space that owned a space and not necessarily one product. And so I would kind of float around from project to project, and then we would spin up an engineering team, and that would be how we execute the project. At Visa, the product manager actually works with the engineering team permanently, right? To say that first day they introduced me, Rory, this is your engineering team, and you're going to be working with them from here on out. So if you have stories or new features that you want to push out, come work with this team. And so you're able to kind of build a relationship with the engineering team, and you're able to roadmap a little bit better. Yes?
How does an engineering manager differ from a product manager?
So an engineering manager, in my experience, has really managed the engineering team, right? So they manage the resources of the people that are there. They manage the day-to-day work that they're working on. And, they manage just how big the team gets scaled up. The product manager is actually there to focus on the product specifically. So my job is focusing on the customer. It's my job every day to be an advocate for the customer's perspective and their experience and all of that. So day to day, my perspective is different than the engineering manager's, because his or her job is really just to get this out the door, make sure it's as efficient as possible, everybody's working hard, and everybody's working on something productive. My job is not to manage people, but to make sure that the customer gets what they want out of what we built. Yes?
Especially given your background in project management, can you give some specific example projects which distinguish product management from your previous work? The same term being used over and over again. But
yes.
How do you distinguish those two, both at a high level and then some actual examples or cases in your PM roles?
Mm-hmm.
Showcase that.
Sorry guys, it's hot. I feel like I need one of those fans right here. Just Michael Jackson. So how do I distinguish project management from product management, especially in my career?
And I should say especially because I've heard sometimes that some PMs get a little bit disgruntled if they end up doing more project management.
Yes. Well, to be honest, let's start with, it depends on the company that you're at. So in my experience, we have had both roles, right? So the project manager is there to kind of manage the timeline, to manage the, to work with the engineering manager and managing the overall resources, right? And making sure that if we say that we're going to launch on August 1st, we're getting out the door, right? So you're managing the Scrum meetings every day. You're managing the Scrum meetings, the stand-ups, the any major milestones that we have. And then the product manager, again, is focused on how are we creating the right experience, right? So for a typical project, let's see. A typical project, we'd actually start with the product manager, myself, leading a group of people, the engineering manager, maybe a couple of engineers, the architect, the UX designer, project manager, and any important stakeholders that need to be involved early. With, okay guys, here is the big grand idea. Now, let's talk about why we need this, what's important about it, what it's going to do for us, and what it's going to do for the customer, right? So I'm there pitching the idea. And then once I've pitched the idea, got in buy-in from stakeholders, I bring the same crew back, and we work through how is this going to work? How much work is this actually? Is this going to take us a month to build? Is this going to take us a year to build? We're working through how many resources do we need on it? What is the actual design of how this works? How does this fit into other things that we're either building as a company or have built? And then from there, it's my responsibility to make sure to be kind of the customer advocate of how we design that experience, right? So monitoring our analytics to say, well, our customer is our customer visits our site for Macy's, right? Our customer is buying something 3 times a month, right? If they're buying something 3 times a month and they're visiting our site 5 times a week, are we not delivering what they need to get all the way through the funnel, right? How do we make sure we're doing that for them, right? So understanding that perspective, understanding their behaviors, and what they do, and then pushing that all the way through. So the project manager is there to make sure that we stay on task, stay on track, and we're managing the right resources. The product manager is kind of the softer skills of making sure that everybody gets together and utilizes their expertise to best serve the customer. Okay. Oh, yes.
I have 2 questions. The first is regarding your role as a senior product manager, just to understand the responsibilities better. So can you please describe what kind of activities are you involved in on a daily basis? Mm-hmm. That's the first question. Second question is, to be a successful senior product manager, what kind of competencies and skills do you think are important?
Okay. So the first question, what do I do on a day-to-day basis, right? There is no such thing as a normal day for a product manager, right? So every day is a little bit different. So one thing that I do every day is attend stand-up, right? So stand-up, does everybody in the room know what stand-up is? Okay. For those that don't, stand-up is a concept of Agile and Scrum, of basically a daily meeting to kind of touch base on what have you accomplished, what are you working on now, and what problems are you having. So you meet with the engineering team, you meet with the designers, you meet with everybody that's involved in the project to talk about these things and to kind of plan out how your iterations are going to work and how the work that you're doing is going to play out. So for me, that's the best way to start my day, is to understand what are the problems and to understand what are we working on and kind of understand the landscape of the company and to see, are priorities changing? And do I need to kind of shift my team in a different direction, right? So after that, a lot of time is spent kind of chasing down problems, right? So setting up meetings with the architects or engineers or other product managers to kind of solution any problems that we may run into. And then going from there, spending time to kind of roadmap to understand, well, what comes next? After we've done this, what is our next priority, our next iteration? Or what else is going on down the road that we need to do? And then in a typical week, maybe not every day, I'm also spending time understanding the industry, understanding the lay of the land. What are other companies doing? For Visa, what is MasterCard doing? Because they're typically one of the most the biggest competitors as far as digital is concerned for Visa. And so after that, obviously, once we've kind of planned out what we're doing, what we're working on, we need to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, of actually writing the stories, right? To say, okay, well, I told my engineers this is what we need to work on, and these are the things that I want to do, but I need to write out the details for them. So taking it beyond a description, taking it beyond just a simple use case, but tying it to user scenarios and who's going to be using this, tying it to acceptance criteria to say, this is how, when it comes down to it, we're going to test it, and this is how it should work exactly, right? And then organizing those in a roadmap for them. And then, I'm sorry, the second part of your question was?
The key skills and competencies to be a successful senior product manager.
Okay. Key skills of a successful product manager is, well, there's several. One, being ready for everything, right? I like to call the product manager the jack of all trades, right? Because no, you are not an engineer. No, you're not a designer. No, you are not marketing. However, you need to understand all of these aspects and more, right? On a typical day, my engineering team may come to me and say, you know what, we've got a problem with our testing environment, and the release engineering team couldn't stand up the test environment for us. And so it's my job to, first of all, understand their problem, and second, allow them to do their job. So take the load off their plate so they're not chasing down some other team to figure out, well, how do we get this environment working? But for me to go do that for them, right? So yeah, being a jack of all trades, right? And being flexible. And then being keen on the customer, to take the time to understand your industry, take the time to understand your competitors, and what's important to your company. Always understand what the goal or the vision of your company is, and how you want to deliver that for your customers on a daily basis. right? So take time for customer surveys, take time for working with the analytics team, and all of these things. And then I would say also being diligent, right? So most people think that being a product manager is about being creative, and it's not necessarily. It's more about having a process and about being diligent enough to kind of repeat that process over and over again, and to continue to look forward and continue to double down and work hard for your product. Prioritization is always fun. It's probably one of the more challenging aspects of product management, because it's something that ties together all of the aspects of what you need to be as a product manager, right? Understanding what's important to your customer, what's important to the business, and understanding what's big for the landscape of your field in general, right? So how do I prioritize is looking at all of those pieces to say, well, okay, what's going to get us a great ROI? Maybe not first and foremost, but that is an important piece, right? What is our customer asking for? And then how long is it going to take us, right? So taking the time to sit down with engineering and understanding, well, how does this work out, and how much time do we expect to spend on this, right? So let's say we have a feature in our backlog that is highly important to the customer. It's going to get us an okay return, but it's going to take us a year to build, right? We would actually look at that and say, well, what does the landscape look like? What are our competitors doing? Are we even going to be relevant in a year once we've launched this? And if we launch it in a year, are we pushing out an MVP, or are we actually pushing out a final product that's going to trump someone else's product, right? And if not, then that's something that we would put at the lower end, because yeah, the customers are asking for it, but it's going to cost us a bit, and it's going to take us a lot of time to do it. As opposed to something that maybe a medium ask for the customers, but a low amount of effort. It's something that we can have a quick hit, because it's always nice to push out something for your customers to say, well, we're thinking of you, right? We've always got you on our mind, and we're pushing out things regularly for you. PayPal is an interesting case, and Amazon alike, right? Because a lot of companies are trying to find ways around Visa. So yes, Visa is a competitor in the digital space, but we're also the rails of money transfer, right? So if you go to a grocery store and whip out your credit card and pay, right? One, you're probably going to pay with a Visa card, more than likely, right? And even if you're not, we make money off of the transactions, of sending that over our rails to say that we're the one that's going to handle the money transfer from the acquiring, or from the issuing bank to the acquiring bank, right? And ultimately to the customer. So those are things that we need to think about as well. But people like PayPal and like Amazon are actually trying to circumvent that and create their own rails, so they can transfer the money without us. And so yes, in that sense, they are a competitor. But in the traditional PayPal sense, not so much, because they still use our rails to transfer money. So we would like to be better than them, but not too much better, because we still need them to survive so we can make more money there. So being at Visa is an interesting balance because of the different dichotomies of that, right? Because yes, we do have the digital space where we want to win, and we want to make sure that everybody is using our products. But we also have our traditional space where we're already kind of the dominant player there, and we don't want to erode that where someone else can come in and take over. But yeah, so from the digital perspective, we've kind of take it a step back to say, well, we'd rather build platforms. We'd much rather enable people to pay and say that we can continue to be your rails here so you could transfer your money, as opposed to being the branding and the face and the product of it that says, okay, well, you have to use us instead of PayPal or instead of something else. Let's see, MVP approach. Yeah, managing expectations is very hard with an MVP, because when it comes to rolling out a product, you have a lot of stakeholders who are involved in that, right? So everyone feels, if you've done your job right as a product manager, everyone feels invested in the product that you're rolling out. So if you sell this huge dream of, we're going to roll out these 35 different features, and that's what people start to kind of expect when you start to build and all of that. And that's their dream of what the product is. But what you have to realize is it's not about what the company's dream is necessarily, but it's more about what does the customer need? What can they get away with, and what's going to get them hooked on our product right away, so we can continue building and working on that later. So the MVP approach, I've used that typically to roll out kind of the minimum of what it takes to get the customer experience there, and the features that we can build the quickest, so we could take our time with the bigger things later. So we could take our time and kind of build up to amazing products in the long term. The question is, what are the key metrics that I use to assess what's a quality product? So that actually will vary product to product, right? So my time at Macy's, in checkout, we were looking at conversion rate to see, well, how many customers would come into the checkout funnel to say that I'm done shopping and I'm ready to pay, and how many would actually exit, right? As opposed to at Visa, we can't really look at the entire checkout space. So if you look at Visa checkout and kind of their space, we are the payment method, but not the entire checkout for consumers, or for merchants, excuse me. So when a customer comes into the merchant's checkout, we're not really tracking that. But our conversion rate is much smaller to say, did they start our flow? Did they end our flow? It doesn't necessarily matter so much as if they paid, but do they start and end? Because that's all we could track. That's the only time that they're there with us, right? And then we could kind of tie it back at the end to say, well, okay, we processed a transaction from these tokens there. But I think overall, when you start to define what are your metrics for a product, you have to really kind of take a step back and understand what is important to your company, and what are your goals that you're looking at going forward, right? So if the goals are growth, right, then you need to see how many customers are using our product daily, how many people completed our goal action that we have there, right? So if you're in an e-commerce situation, it's checkout, right? It's actually paying for the product. But let's say you're at Facebook. If it might be liking a picture. That's your goal action, right? So it doesn't matter how many people view pictures. If they didn't like it, it doesn't matter. So understanding the goals and the phase that you're in for your product. And then understanding what's next for your product and what you're trying to accomplish, right? So looking at the conversion rates and looking at just kind of the larger space there to understand the behaviors that you're trying to instill in your customers.
Do the stakeholders help you come up with those criteria?
Yes, a lot of the times. A lot of the times they do. The stakeholders are very involved in that process because they have their own goals and metrics, right? To say that, well, as a VP of marketing, I need to make sure that what we did was effective, right? That we put something out there and that customers are clicking on that. But from an engineering perspective, you need to make sure that it's working and they're using the right aspects of your product, right? Or let me rephrase that. There are no right aspects of the product, right? You have your goals of how you expect the customer to use it. And then you monitor as much as you can to understand how they actually use it, because your perspective may change, your metrics may change. So what trends do I identify in product management as a field? Well, first, let me get a show of hands. I'm assuming everyone in here wants to be a product manager, but how many want to be at a startup, a small, less than 500 people startup? Okay. How many people want to be at a large company? Visas, the Macy's, PayPal's, okay. It's about half of that. So the trends in each space are different, right? At many of the large companies that I've been at, I've had the luxury of having an analytics team that does the SQL for me, so I don't have to think about that, right? I've had the luxury of not having to jump in and actually code with my team, right? But if you're at a startup and you're at a company that has less than 100 people, your job as the product manager is to get the product out the door. So you do whatever is necessary, right? So that may mean learning SQL. That may mean jumping in with your engineering team or the designers or being more hands-on in these spaces, right? Or actually being the marketing person and launching the product. But as far as the trends, I do see product managers getting more hands-on, right? Because it's easier and easier every day to learn to code, right? It's easier and easier every day to learn how to do different aspects of a company. And so what I've seen is people doing everything at a startup and then coming to a larger company and having a higher title because they've done so much and they understand so many different aspects. And so the more you understand and the more that you can kind of have your hands in the breadth of what product management touches, the better off you'll be at a new job. Okay. How is product management different in different industries, right? So let's see. So as I said, in a lot of the larger companies, that's kind of how we'll break it down, right? There's the large company, there's a small company, there's hardware companies versus software companies. There are I think that would probably be the best way to look at it, right? It's a large company versus small company and hardware versus software. Because there's not really commonalities, or there are a lot of commonalities between looking at healthcare and looking at payments and things of that nature as far as a small company is concerned. But on a large scale, when you're looking at like the Macy's and the PayPals and the Googles and things like that, I think product management is kind of the same there, but different than startups, right? So looking at on the startup side, right? As I said, a lot of the product managers are doing everything, right? They've got their hands involved in the analytics and working with hands-on with the engineers at times, and the style is to get things out as quickly as possible. So whatever it takes for you as a product manager to do that, get it done. So a lot of times it may take a while to get to the much bigger feature, but you're tracking your growth to make sure that you get there first, right? So as a 100-person startup, it doesn't make sense for me to carve out a gigantic plan to say, well, this is our dream for the industry, and then build it all on day one or day 1 through 1,000 and not launch until then, right? You build incremental pieces and keep listening to your customers as you go forward. But when you look at something the size of a Google would have the luxury to say, well, we're not going to launch this until it's ready, right? As opposed to in a startup, it's we need to launch as quickly as possible, because every day that we're not in the market is a day that we're losing. And so the product management style in a larger company is able to transition a little bit. You're able to take that from the frantic, I need to do everything and I need to push everybody at all times, to being a little bit more reflective and understanding, taking the time to understand your industry and your roadmap and all of these things. You'll find a lot of the larger companies, the product managers, sit on industry standard boards and work with smaller startups and work with, go to conferences to learn more about what's there. But at a startup, you don't necessarily have that luxury all of the time. Does that answer your question? Oh, and hardware versus software. I think the process is a little bit different, hardware versus software. So if we look at the hardware companies, you don't always, unless you've got a software component with it, you don't always have the luxury of launching a 0.1 version of it, right? You launch version 1 and say this is the done product, and we'll come back next year for version 2, right? As opposed to software, you could say, well, this is version 1. What do you guys think? Oh, something's broken. Here's 0.1. Here's a software update for you. So as a result of that, hardware companies are typically what we call a waterfall process, right? So their hardware development is in the waterfall phase, where it's they have one step after another, and we ideate and we say this is what our product is going to be. We write it all down. We write out a 200-page document to say this is how our product is going to work. Everyone agrees. And then we go forward to, all right, now let's design it and let's work with engineering to figure out how this is going to lay out. Everyone agrees? Okay, move forward to the next step, right? And in software, we work more in the agile space, right? We move as quickly as possible and kind of build consensus on smaller pieces and build, or ideate, design, build, repeat. Ideate, design, build, repeat.
Experiences before.
Right. So what is my advice for getting your first product management role? And how do you sell experience that isn't necessarily a product manager role, right? Well, I think, in my opinion, it's starting with things that are relevant to you, right? So most hiring managers understand that there's only so much that you could learn on the job right away, right? So if you're learning product management, then they may not have time to teach you about a completely new industry, right? So your best bet is to start with applying for jobs that are already in an industry that you know, understand, and can speak to. And then on top of that, being able to understand what product management is, and maybe you don't know how to do it, and you don't have any experience in it, but you could speak to it. You understand what a product manager does, what their role is, how they fit into the company, and what they should be doing on a day-to-day basis. If you can start to relate your past experiences to that, to say, well, no, I haven't been a product manager, but I understand that they work with engineering teams. Here's an example of the time that I worked with an engineering team. Here's an example of a time that I fought for the customer to build a new product, and so on and so forth. To be able to relate all of those things in an interview would almost definitely be able to get you to the next step for an entry-level position. Okay, so how do we break down kind of our roadmap into individual requirements? Is that what you're asking?
Sort of starting with a strategy and vision, and then go into, okay, these are the requirements written as stories.
Okay,
right. Fine-grained enough for a tech team to deliver.
Right. Well, there's a lot of it involves meetings and kind of whiteboarding, right? As a product manager, one of the most important things that you, or the most important soft skills, I guess, that you need is the ability to be confident to whiteboard. to stand up in front of a room and write out your ideas so everyone can see it, right? Because people are going to poke holes in it, right? So you may have a vision, but as a product manager, you don't build anything in a silo, right? You may come up with the idea and push people to kind of the vision of what it is, but you rely on every other role in the company to help you flesh that out and to make sure that it's concrete, right? So it starts with whiteboarding sessions for me. I get my architects and my lead engineers and designers and bring them all in a room together and say, all right, guys, this is what I'm thinking. And this is how I imagine it's going to work. And whiteboard it out, and I allow them to start poking holes, to say, well, I don't understand this, or we can't do that because we don't have this piece here. And so after a couple of sessions, it's kind of flushed out of where all our gaps are, where our major pieces are, where the most work is going to come from. And we can start to break that up into smaller pieces to say, okay, well, if we need to do this, we need to re-platform, right? We need to build this on a completely different platform, right? So we take that as one chunk and understand, well, how do we break that up? What is our baby steps to getting to re-platforming, right? And then as a product manager, being there to understand, or being there to reiterate, well, just because we can build something one way and it might be the most efficient, doesn't mean that it's always necessarily the best for the customer, right? So being that advocate for the customer in the room that's always keeping in mind what the customer experience is going to shake out like once you've built things the way that your team is talking about, right? One of the hardest things as a product manager is saying no constantly, is telling people, yes, that's a great idea, but we can't do it that way because our customer won't respect it, or our customer doesn't think that way, or something like that, right? So now that we've got kind of all these chunks, it's on the product manager to kind of organize it, to say, okay, well, this is what we need to, we've got 8 chunks of code that we need to build, right? And to say, well, these are the ones that we absolutely need to build first. So I'll start thinking about these now and start understanding the requirements of what that looks like. Of what is the user interface design, right? What API calls are we making? What tweaks to interaction on the site or on the app or whatever you're building are going to change as a result of building these new portions, right? And then that's where your stories come from, is understanding all of those nuances and understanding every aspect of your product and what's changing and how it affects what's already there. Does that make sense? All right. So for my role, specifically at Visa, so our customers, I use that in quotes because it's not the typical customer that you would think, right? Just because you have a Visa card in your wallet doesn't mean you're our only customer, right? Excuse me. So we think about the consumer themselves as a customer. We think about the credit card issuers, to say Chase Bank or Bank of America or something like that, somebody who is using our name on their card. We think about the merchants, the stores who are accepting the cards. We think about the acquiring banks. So after the store accepts our card, where's the money going, right? And then we think about ourselves as well, because we are the rails, the money transfer of, we're the way that all this money moves back and forth, right? So we think of kind of all of these spaces as customers. So on a day-to-day basis, my role is really working with a lot of the partners, working with the Googles and the Samsungs and LGs and the Chases and companies like that to say, okay, we want to build something into your app or into your device or your car or your internet connected device, whatever it may be, to allow customers to pay. And so on a day-to-day basis, I may be working with them to actually kind of iron out all of those requirements and understand what it is they need. But then when we're working on bigger, major projects, sometimes we may not interact with them every day. So it may be months between interactions with them. Because at the end of the day, our team is there for platforms. Right. So what we're building is a platform to say that, yes, Chase has asked us to build something, and we think it's great, but is that going to work for Chase and Bank of America and Wells Fargo and all these other banks that are customers as well? So if we add this to our platform, how do we roll that out across everybody? And how is that good for all of them? So a lot of times when we think about building something, we do need to kind of reach out and say, hey guys, what do you think about this? We're going to make this change. How does that affect you?
How that works.
Yeah. So what influence do I as a product manager have with the stakeholders across the company and the executives within the company about the product vision, right? Yeah, as a product manager, that is a large portion of my job as well, is to interact with what we call stakeholders across the company to say that, guys, this is what we as a team have seen, right? These are the gaps that we've seen. This is how we see the customers interacting with what we've seen and what they're asking for. And so I push that up. And then a lot of times the executives are also the ones kind of seeing across the industry. They're understanding government relations of how things are going to change for laws for us and all of that, right? So they have kind of a different plane of perspective of what they're looking at of how our product should behave. And they're coming to me to make sure that that's on my roadmap and to make sure that I understand that in the things that I'm building. So as a product manager, yes, I do have a lot of influence in how that builds out, but I am not the only person. I'm more of the person who corrals all of the opinions and all of the perspectives to say that everyone's perspective is equally important, but we also need to consider our customer here. So how do we put all this together to make a great product that's satisfying for everybody? There's a lot of different ways that I've done that across my career, right? So the multivariate testing, I haven't used as much, I would say. Within my career, a lot of the ways that we kind of figure out, well, what do we build next, and what is our customer actually asking for, is looking at our day-to-day analytics tags, and then looking at customer interviews as well. Actually, so at Macy's, we had the luxury of being able to bring in a customer to actually reach out and say, well, hey, you shop on our site before. You should come in. We'll give you a gift card and let you shop. And we just want to see how you shop, or we want to see how you use this new feature that we've launched or that we're considering launching, right? So we can take our MVP and prototype it, and to say we're going to build a test version of what we think we're going to launch, and just watch and see how people behave with it, right? And then looking at A/B testing to understand. A lot of times it's understanding the psychology of our customer, right? So we launched PayPal on our site, right? We launched with a silver and blue button because it didn't really clash with any of our colors on our site, right? So that's the one we chose. But after we launched it and customers got into the habit of actually spending or coming through the flow and using PayPal as a payment source, we said, well, could we get more customers? How do we understand if they're actually seeing it or recognizing it? Because not everybody has this silver and blue button that we're using. Some people have the yellow button. So what we did is we set up an A/B test, which is a 1-to-1, right? So we would split our traffic to say that any customer that came on the site, 50% would see a yellow button, 50% would see a blue button. And let's see which one performed better, right? Which one had a better conversion rate. And so we would test that out to see, well, what button stuck out to them more. And eventually we switched to the yellow button because that worked, right? Because they saw that, they recognized that, even though we might have felt like it was an eyesore on our site, it worked for our customer. I'm processing how to respond to this because I understand we're recording and I don't want to put too much esoteric information out there. But yeah, so that's something that I've gone through before, right? And the best way to deal with it is really knowing your stuff, right? You're not just telling your stakeholders no just for the sake of saying no because I don't like it personally, right? You're telling them no because you understand the customer and how they behave and what they want. And you understand how your site works. And you understand how everything is fine-tuned in the products that you're putting out, right? So your response isn't, no, I think that's a dumb idea. Your response is, okay, well, let's think about why do you want this, right? What do you think it's going to do for us, right? And kind of walk through that thought process and start to take it point for point to say, well, okay, well, how would our customer respond to this, right? So you want to, let's make up a hypothetical. I'm at Macy's and we want to put Bitcoin as a payment source, right? What's our pros and cons of that? The pro is we are a cool company because we accept Bitcoin, right? Not a lot of people are doing that and we're ahead of the curve, right? The con is Bitcoin prices fluctuate every single day, right? So we may have gotten a $200 order from somebody today, but tomorrow it's only worth 85, right? And so being able to weigh that out with your stakeholders and have empathy for their perspective, but also understanding of what the customers are actually going to use, right? In the Bitcoin case, the biggest thing is at Macy's, our customers were older, right? So a 65-year-old grandma probably isn't using Bitcoin, right? She probably doesn't care about Bitcoin. So if we implement it, yeah, we've got the cool points, but that's fleeting. That's going to last a couple of weeks, and we need to understand who our customers are so we can make those decisions instinctively. So a lot of so if you look at Visa, that's typically a pretty high up person that would be in charge of that, right? So like SVP level, president level, something like that, right? To say that they're in charge of understanding. Well, let's put it like this. As the PM, I'm feeding a lot of that information up the chain to kind of say, well, this is what our customer did in the past quarter. This is how they behaved, and this is what they're asking for. And me making my decisions from a software perspective to say, okay, well, this is how we need to adjust and create new things to make their experience better. Because that's what I'm there for, is to create a great experience for them, right? But from kind of an executive standpoint, yes, they are in charge of the P&L. They're in charge of making the decision of, is this making us enough money? If not, maybe I should just cut the program and move on to something else, right? They're in charge of relationships and government relations, right? To say, well, if we were to work with another credit card company on the way our product works, would that be collusion, right? Is the government going to step in and shut us down for doing that, right? They think about how it fits into the broader aspect of the company itself, right? So on a day-to-day basis, they probably have a lot more that they're managing, right? Amongst dozens and hundreds of people. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it sounds like at the very least, like many PMs will be reporting into this business manager.
Yes, definitely.
If they're responsible, I imagine to some extent their performance is based on like the P&L of whatever business line they're in charge of.
Mm-hmm.
Are PMs kind of evaluated against their core metrics, so whether it's engagement or it's like the number of payments per the count of users who are using your product. Is that how your performance is specifically measured against some KPIs for your product?
It depends on the company, right? Some companies do. Some companies is purely how you're performing as a product manager, right? Are you setting goals and executing on them, right? But yes, there are some roles out there where you might be responsible for the P&L. There was one company that I interviewed for that we're going to leave nameless. That the way they structured it is I don't remember the title exactly. I believe it was the program manager was actually the one responsible for the P&L, and the program manager title had everyone reporting to them. So the analytics managers, the dev managers, design, PM, everybody reported up to this one person. And so, yes, they looked out for the broader picture of things, right? But they also had the reporting structure as well. And so, yes, it was much easier in that sense to measure a PM on the core metrics, as you say, of what they should be delivering, because you're in that reporting structure. But it's a little bit harder for someone who's on the other side of Visa, right, to measure me on that, right? My boss is measuring me on what did I deliver, and what am I getting out the door, and am I actually working with the engineers properly? Am I working with the other teams properly to get things out the door? That answer your question? Okay, great. Anything else? So
Like the social part, right?
yeah. So how does the social aspect of being a product manager work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the dynamics you've seen.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's the social aspect is critical to what a product manager does, because you have to build relationships, because you don't own anything. Nobody reports to you, right? Typically as a product manager, maybe other product managers if you're my boss, but no one reports to me at all. But I have to influence everyone. I have to make sure the engineers are moving quickly, right? I have to make sure the stakeholders understand what the vision is that we're moving towards, right? I have to influence people every single day. And so it pays tremendously to build individual relationships with all of those people that you work with, right? Start by taking everybody out to lunch, right? Maybe not together, because that'd be kind of expensive, but individually, have coffee dates and lunch and all of that to build relationships and to find a common understanding, because it makes your job easier on a day-to-day basis, right? If I've been at the company 6 months and I've never interacted with you, and I come to your desk and ask you for something, you'll be like, okay, I'm kind of busy, I've got other things. But if I'm the guy that talks to you every day and we've gone to coffee and you've told me about your kids and all of that, you'd be like, okay, I can help Rory out. It makes the relationship a lot easier. And you're constantly going to need to rely on that across the board, across all the roles to push your product forward. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry that was our last question, but if anybody has any more questions for me, I will be here afterwards. So I'm happy to sit down and talk about anything that you have questions about.